As they followed a bizarre complex of chambers 3 miles into the earth, they discovered thousands of offerings to ancient gods, including tools and ceramics made from the semi-precious stone obsidian. As Holly and her team followed the trail deeper and deeper into the cave, it appeared to have no end. Where would it ultimately lead to? Descriptions of the caves in the Popolva, an ancient Maya creation myth, has led many to believe these archaeologists had uncovered an opening to the ancient underworld known as Xibalba, a much-feared threshold to the afterlife. But are these Mayan myths of an underground simply folklore? Or could there be some scientific evidence that habitable places below the Earth could exist?
There's a lot of scientists today, planetary scientists, credible planetary scientists, that will tell you that when a planet evolves, when it comes into being, it has to do so in such a way that the center is hollow. And in fact, they dropped a bomb on the moon not too long ago, and the geologist, NASA geologist, wanted to record the vibrations coming out of it so they could tell something about the inner structure, and it rang for 8 hours like a bell, like an empty bell. And that kind of gives you a glimpse. Now, whether or not the Earth itself is completely hollowed out inside, or whether or not they are just vast inner caverns that might be the size of whole continents, I'm not sure. But what I can tell you is that in ancient civilization, all over the globe, they have these stories.
When we look at the creation stories of our past, as different as they are from one another, there are common themes that weave them all together. One of the most obvious of these common threads is the theme of another world beneath this one, a world, subterranean world, from which our ancestors emerged. The Mayan calendar, for example, is a circular calendar, and it shows 4 boxes with unique glyphs representing the 4 worlds of the past. And the Maya say there have been 4 previous worlds. We live in the 5th world. It is represented by the circle and the image that is staring right at us from that circle. Each of those 4 previous worlds was destroyed. One was destroyed by wind, one was destroyed by fire, one was destroyed by ice. And when the ice melted, a great flood destroyed the 4th world. And that flood story is one of the common themes that we find throughout these indigenous traditions. So the question is that just mythology? Or are there any physical links that can help us relate to these in the real world?
Maybe the links in the physical world are to our genetic existence, and how humans were able to survive cataclysm after cataclysm.
All species tend to transcend into something else sooner or later. This is the process of evolution and natural selection. You need species to have the ability to bounce back from assaults. For example, if you have a giant asteroid or comet hit the Earth and make life on Earth extremely fragile and tenuous, you need to be able to bounce back from that. In other words, you need to be able to duck and dive and evolve to adapt to the new situations and keep the project of life going. The whole process of evolution is a process of unfolding. Could we become very different from what we are now? Yes, given enough time, given enough new situations to adapt to and develop with.
Could these new situations have included taking refuge within the inner Earth?
If you go back to the Mesopotamian creation stories, they talked about gods from the sky basically bioengineering a form of humanity that was already here, creating a more modern form. but they don't necessarily say that the engineering was done in the sky. For example, Enki was also the god of the underwater realms. So there was a possibility that maybe there was some realm underwater or underground where some of this activity was being conducted. And so you have this possibility, at least within the lore. You don't necessarily exclude skyborn gods from gods that lived underground, because people had both ideas, that the gods had realms underground, underwater, and in the sky, and they interacted with all of them.
If the underworld is not only a place of creation, might it also have been a place to hide? In the Hebrew Bible, the Nephilim were the sons of gods mingling with the daughters of Adam. They were also known as giants and considered to be the fallen ones. Michael Mott's research suggests that they might have retreated underground. Are these the giants described in ancient texts?
What became of the gods? I'm not sure that I can give an answer to this question. Maybe that the survivors, the ones that could still be alive in our solar system, live underground on Earth.
Perhaps the answer to this question lies deep in the Amazon jungle, 2,500 miles south of Belize. An indigenous tribe known as the Makushi have lived here with little contact from the outside world until the mid-18th century, and yet their mythology is almost identical to beings who protect the hollow earth described by the Mayans.
You have that South American tradition, which is very interesting, of the tribe that said that they were guarding the entrance to the inner earth. And they said it would take maybe a couple of weeks to finally get down far enough where they would meet the inhabitants, and they were just these gigantic people, anywhere between 10 and 11.5 feet tall. So, of course, the common idea is that, oh, this is just a bunch of mythology by primitive people. But what's interesting is they talked about how when they got far enough down, one of the things they saw was basically molten rock. And that's exactly what modern science tells us you should find underneath the earth. And how would a primitive people know that? There are also areas where there's all this lush plants and food and the people living down there. Can we take that seriously? We're left with this very interesting myth that has a few intriguing elements to it. It's worth a look if we can get down there.
Traveling for 15 days down into this cavern until they literally put down their torches, because there's these inner balls of light that will light you the rest of the way on steps that are 33 inches long. Eventually making it into caverns where food was growing, lit by 4 large sun-like discs that they couldn't even stare at, they were so bright. And they describe the food as being apples the size of a human head, grapes the size of a human fist, interacting with giant beings that they described as being 3 to 4 meters in height, who would catch giant fish for them and give it to them as a gift. That kind of detail, there has to be some truth to it. Now, whether it's completely hollow inside or whether or not these vast caverns are just there, I believe that they're there.
Could these strange species be linked to the Sumerian gods? Many of these stories about a lost civilization under the earth from indigenous cultures around the world have strong similarities. Is it possible that these giant creatures were the sages described in ancient Sumerian texts and others? And did these beings bring back humanity after a cataclysm?
In Sumerian tradition and in the surviving texts that have been passed down to us, there is a very strong and intriguing reference to what are called the 7 antediluvian sages. You go over to India and we have the 7 rishis. So this number keeps on cropping up. We can go further away to Easter Island, and there we discover an ancient tradition that civilization was first brought to Easter Island by 7 initiated men. Now, how are we to take all of this, and how can we put it into some kind of context? For me, what I think we're looking at is more evidence that there was a high civilization that we have lost track of, that we truly are a species with amnesia, and that we have forgotten a very important part of our story. and fragments of that story crop up all around the world. What I think we're looking at is an outreach program. An outreach program reaching out to the hunter-gatherers in what we would call the Upper Paleolithic, and beginning to teach certain of them selected skills, giving them the gifts of civilization. But to find this theme again and again and again, the 7 sages, the 7 wise men, teaching the gifts of civilization, I would say we are looking at symbolic allusions towards the outreach of a lost civilization.
We are drawn to caves. Joseph Campbell said that all of the world's religions probably started in some cave in Siberia, where the first shamans went and had a dream or a vision, told a story, and the story was retold and retold. Interesting that it might have been in a cave. Well, the shamans in Siberia lived in caves, but caves reach down and down. Spelunkers go and explore the depths of unseen parts of the planet. This planet, the planet we have known and studied so well, there are all these unseen places. There is more to be known. Even as our technology advances, we have to be humbled by how much close at hand we do not know. The ancients, the people, the primal people that lived close to the earth, saw the gods and spirits, the sacred energies as down in those places. Whether we go down to explore physically, personally, I'll let somebody else do the exploring. But I want to explore mentally and spiritually. I want to imagine what is below us, what the earth has to teach us. It is a living thing, and our lives are tied to it. So we don't have to be adherents of the ancient nature religions to know this is important stuff. But the stories can help us.